Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 100, which is season 4, episode 25 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show where we bring you... I've completely screwed this one. Man, that's pressure.
There you go.
We bring you stories of the greatest mistakes in human history and give you lessons made by those mistakes so that you can learn from them and never repeat them again. But who are we kidding? We're humans. We like making mistakes, and I ain't getting a second take of that one. So fuck that. Joining me for the 100th, probably more like 100 and something now, 100th time is my co-host, my hetero life mate, and my dear friend Derek. Derek, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I love that almost every time we nail the intro with an example of a mistake.
No, I'm setting an example for what people can learn from by, not getting their fucking head in the game early. Thank you to our regular viewer, listener, subscriber, Toasterzoid, with the great introduction, the good old milk snatcher. I'm really glad you mentioned that. I'm going to get to that a little bit later on. That'll be a mystery to Derek, but we'll get to the milk snatching a little bit. And
everything's a mystery, man.
Yes, Silent Crisis. Thank you so much for the congratulations. And we're going to talk about Silent Crisis in a little bit as well. Thank you so much. Glad you're doing the Akhenaten episode next season. Yes, I am going to do Akhenaten. I'm going to try and find as much information as possible so that we can cover the things that you want. So, Derek, before we get going with our 100th episode, I wanted to give you some statistics, you and everyone out there, of what we've covered in our time. Obviously, we've covered, I think it's so we've done a number, but it's actually close to 75 idiots or idiot scenarios, people in our time. We have produced over 200 hours of original content in this podcast, and even more if you go on Patreon. And we have hit 75,000 plays on all platforms. This is all stuff I've memorized now. And over 2,000 followers on all platforms as well, which I love. We have an average monthly consumption time, as in the amount of time people listen to our podcast, of over 1,100 hours. That's per month. That's how much time is spent listening to our podcast by our people. And we have, segue, 6 amazing patrons, and I just want to say thank you so much to the patrons who have consistently supported us over the last couple of years or few years since we started doing this. Most of you joined in 2023 or 2024, but thank you so much to our OG patron Jesse Christ, our wonderful friend who joins us in the stream occasionally, Kimberly Johnson, Andrew Zavara, Dilly Bob, Silent Crisis, who's with us in the chat, and our newest patron, Carrion. Thank you so much for supporting us and being with us all through all this time. If you would like to join them in supporting us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/history's greatest idiots, where you will get access to a welcome gift. You will get an annual gift for every year that you stay with us. And as well, you will have access to behind the scenes stuff like stuff from our lives. You will have access to scripts, exclusive Patreon recordings, and a bunch of other cool stuff like that as well. Access to our chat, which occasionally we respond to. So,
I'll log back into that.
Yeah, I will too.
I got a new phone.
And also I'm sleepy. So also, if you would like to follow us on Instagram, go to at History's Greatest Idiots on Instagram. Same thing over on YouTube. You can find us at History's Greatest Idiots over there. And if you want to watch us on Spotify, you can watch video format over there as well. So go and find us on Spotify. So
your Instagram post did pretty well, and that's where we're active, really.
So mentioned the Blue Sky. Yeah, we are on Blue Sky. I don't really use it that much. I added us to Blue Sky.
Hey,
I posted some of our content. Yeah, it's okay. I posted some of our content, and then I just sort of, because I don't use social media that much anymore, I've just sort of left it. really. But yes, we are on Blue Sky. If you look for History's Greatest Idiots, go on there as well. And I will try and be more active. So to the Instagram thing, I had this thing a few days ago. I said to my wife, I was like, I need to do a trailer for the 100th episode. I have this big vision of like Margaret Thatcher. Spoilers, we're covering Margaret Thatcher. Thumbnail, you know what you're getting. And I want to do like moments from her tenure and her premiership, and cover the fact that it was a moment in history, and I want to do a big video. I think she's like, go and do it. And I was editing that for hours, finding the footage, snipping, cutting it down, making sure it was high quality, balancing the audio, and then I just fucking did away with most of the audio in the end. And I posted it online, and I got like 110 views on Instagram. I think it got like 50 on LinkedIn, and I was like, all right, people have given me compliments on that. One of my best friends was like, this is really good editing, and I was like, thank you so much. And then just randomly, when it was Thanksgiving, because Derek and another friend of ours, Josh Wilson, obviously based over in America, I was like, I'm going to make a funny Thanksgiving meme thing. So I edited a picture of a graph that showed the most Googled menu recipes for Thanksgiving. And I edited one of the options from, I don't know if it was mashed potato or something, to how to bury a hooker.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I just sent it to you guys. Just randomly, I was like, happy Thanksgiving, and you were both like, oh, that's really funny, thank you. And then stupidly, I was like, I'll put it on Instagram. What the hell? I'll make it into a little funny reel, and it's been viewed 16,000 times,
which is awesome because everybody just needs to know where to bury a dead hooker.
Exactly.
In Jersey, and New York, and Pennsylvania, apparently.
Particularly in Jersey. That seems to be, yeah. It's 16,000 views, 540 likes, and like it's been shared and sent 250 times to other people, and we got 4 new followers out of it on Instagram. So I was like, God damn, I put virtually no effort into that.
That's my theory, is that I'm no longer putting any effort into anything that I do.
No, just fuck it.
You're welcome.
Thanks internet. You've made us just become, we don't care about anything. We've become, what's that word I'm looking for?
Complacent? No,
no, nihilists. We're nihilistic.
Oh, yeah,
We're nihilistic content creators now. So thank you for that. But so with it being the 100th episode, it needed to be someone big, because we covered some big names in the thing. And, I really enjoyed covering John Belushi in the last episode. That was a little bit more lighthearted, even though he had massive addiction issues. There was like a lot of milestones in there from popular culture in the 80s. And it was really cool to be able to cover that.
Right. It's always nice to cover, I think, the greatest side.
Yes, for sure. And also something that a lot of people have very warm feelings towards. Most people look back at John Belushi and they think that was just a fun time, just an interesting dude. I really like taking in the story and all the people that he was around, how he came up. And it's kind of a really cool, interesting story. The person we're covering today ain't going to be that much fun. I'm going to try and make it as fun as possible. That's not a great way of selling this podcast, but I've written 5,225 words on the lady, Margaret Thatcher, and I was saying to Derek before, and I could have done five times as many as that, probably more, because I've just tried to cover the bigger, broad strokes of her tenure as Prime Minister. She was Prime Minister for over 11 years, the second longest in British history at the time. So
it's quite a while.
It's a long time, and it came about in the late 70s. She lasted right through the 80s, and that was a very pivotal time in the world and in the UK's history, and a lot of the pivotal stuff happened because of her. So
you think cocaine had anything to do with it?
Oh no, she wouldn't have done cocaine. She was more of a
I mean like how she was in there. I'm making bad jokes.
I think if anything, she was going to be fueled by opium. It was just more stay. I think she's more of an opium smoker, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay,
she looks like it.
That's looking at the pictures over here. I see that.
And yeah, we're going to have a bunch of really interesting pictures because there's going to be stuff coming up that kind of iconic moments. Some of the pictures we may not be able to show, especially when I get to the Falklands War, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. That was a whole thing. So, the script is called Margaret Thatcher, the most hated woman in the history of the UK. And that is not an exaggeration. That's right up there. And you'll see why when we get to the very end of the story, just how hated she is. Margaret Hilda, just before we get going, Toastoid, fun fact, there's an orc in Warhammer 40k based on the Iron Lady called Gaskell Magarak Thraka. Wow. Yeah. So she's got an orc named after her, you know? Michael.
Well,
yeah.
You know you're something else if you've got an orc named after you.
You know, David Attenborough's got a rose, and this woman has an orc from a dystopian long-running series of adventure and fantasy games. Margaret Hilda Thatcher was born on the 13th of October 1925 in Grantham, Lincolnshire. Her parents were Alfred Roberts from Northamptonshire and Beatrice Ethel Stevenson also from Lincolnshire, I should say. I want a hobbit named after me. Is that a hobbit or a... Yeah. What would I like named after me? I think probably a meal at my Chinese restaurant, my local Chinese place.
Yeah, a sandwich. Sandwich
would be good. Yeah. That's a good, satisfying, continuous thing where it like works its way into popular culture. You know, whereas Chinese meal, just bury me in it. So her father's maternal grandmother, Catherine Sullivan, was born in County Kerry, Ireland. So Margaret Thatcher was descended from Irish people.
Oh,
yes. It's very important to remember for later on, especially with what's going to happen to her. Robert spent her childhood in Grantham, where her father owned a tobacconist's and a grocery shop. In 1938, before the Second World War, the Roberts family briefly gave sanctuary to a teenage Jewish girl who had escaped Nazi Germany. So,
well, that was kind of them.
It really was, actually, and we'll get to more of that. Toastoid here. To be fair, your full first name does sound like some kind of gourmet. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it sounds pretty gourmet. I'll take that. Although more, just as long as it tastes good, I don't care. So with her pen-friending elder sister Muriel, they maintained a pen-friend relationship right the way up until she died. They would write to each other constantly from the time they were children. Margaret Thatcher saved up enough pocket money to help pay for the teenager's journey from Nazi Germany to the UK.
So she bought
Thatcher
her
paid.
ticket, or like did she have to smuggle her out at that time?
So there was like a system of networks that people could access to get people out of Germany, and it was just very expensive. It was like a philanthropic version of people smuggling, and that Margaret Thatcher worked and did stuff on the side to earn money to help this girl get out of Nazi Germany, and that's genuinely wonderful.
Yeah. And then what happened?
Yeah. So, that's a really good start in life. And clearly, obviously, around about this time, it didn't matter who you were and what side of the political divide you were on, except if you were, part of the British fascist movement, and we've already covered Mr. Mosley. Pretty much everyone, no matter who they were, tried to do everything they could to assist in the war effort, get people out of Nazi Germany, and just everyone realized what was coming. And they just wanted to do everything they could to stop it from getting worse. Alfred, her father, was an alderman and a Methodist local preacher.
Okay.
So, not Methodist preachers. You hear the word preacher and you think passion, right? Generally, quite powerful movement. Even in this country, like there is a thing called Welsh Baptists in Wales, and they are very powerful, forceful, like preachers and speakers and things like that. I don't think of that when I think of Methodist preaching. It's very much like, right, let's everyone calm the fuck down. Okay. And let's talk about the Lord. That's basically what Methodism is in this country. It's very sedate and pared back.
And so that's how her dad
that's the kind of preacher he was. Pared back, relaxed, middle class. He brought up his daughter as a strict Wesleyan Methodist. That's a segment of Methodists. I don't know.
Wesleyan.
Maybe John Wesley, possibly. I don't know. I don't know
Wesley
what Christian
Snipes.
history. Wesley Snipes. Yeah. And the Lord said, "Do not pay your taxes." Attending the Finkin Street Methodist Church. But Margaret was more skeptical. The future scientist told a friend that she could not believe in angels, having calculated that they needed a breastbone 6 foot long to support the wings. Giant tits.
The math.
Yeah.
Did the math. Angels can't exist.
Yeah, they'd need enormous chests. They'd need to be like battery chickens. It just wouldn't work. And her dad's like, "Shut up and pray to the bearded man in the sky, Margaret, for God's sake." Alfred came from a liberal family, but stood, as was the customary in local government, as an independent. So he didn't pick sides. Angels with giant tits. There's some anime fodder for you right now. He served as mayor of Grantham from 1945 to 1946 and lost his position as alderman in 1952 after the Labour Party won its first majority on Grantham Council. Labour Party, after the war, really came into their own because Churchill was ousted straight away because, well, he is an iconic wartime figure. That man could not run a country. So people were like, yeah, we'd like to start eating normally again now instead of like having to kill cats and dogs for food.
Yeah, so, starving will lose an election.
Yeah, it will. Destroy people's supply chain and make sure they can't eat 3 square meals a day. They'll vote you out of office really quickly. Roberts attended Hunting Tower Road Primary School and won a scholarship to Kesteven and Grantham's Girls' School, a grammar school, and they were very prestigious at the time. They weren't private, but grammar schools were like the top of the free schooling charts. They were always really popular. So, yeah.
When I hear grammar school, I mush that together with the finishing school thing, and I see people walking around books on their heads, that sort of thing. Or
I mean, it's not
thinking like kindergarten, first grade, like little kid school.
No, grammar. You're pretty close with the finishing school shit because they would have had to wear uniforms. They would have, they would have had very strict timetables. They'd have had very old buildings with lots of facilities, and it would have been pretty close to a private education, but not quite there, really. Also, he's a tobacconist and a preacher, and what was the other thing I mentioned? He owns a grocer's shop, so they're not wealthy. They're kind of middle class, so they probably couldn't afford a private education for her at the time because it would have been very, very expensive. So even with a scholarship, her school reports showed hard work and continual improvement. Her extracurricular activities included the piano, field hockey, poetry recitals, swimming, walking, and shooting up heroin. That last one was a lie.
Is it four hobbies and a lie?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, 4 hobbies and a lie, and the prequel to Trainspotting with Margaret Thatcher. She was head girl. This is a thing that happens in British schools where you have head boy and head girl, and they're
in charge of shit or what?
They're like the captain of the team. They're the go-between between the teachers and the student body. They're the figureheads of the student body. So student council you guys have there, president and stuff. It's basically that, only it's not elected. We have a monarchy, so they basically inherit it based on what the fucking electoral college of teachers tell them is going to happen. She was head girl in 1942 to 43, and outside school, while the Second World War was ongoing, she voluntarily worked as a fire watcher at the local ARP service, so staring at the pretty flames while the building burns to the ground. It's very on brand for Margaret Thatcher right there. That's not what they do. They look out for fires and they go, fire! Oh, yeah, over here. Yeah, buckets. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's their job. Okay. Most people have a paper round.
Yeah.
So. Other students thought of Roberts as the star scientist, although mistaken advice regarding cleaning ink from parquetry That's like wood carving stuff.
Okay.
It's like a wood shape and a style and stuff. So they asked for her advice on cleaning it for parquetry. And because she was the star scientist, she was like, oh, just do this, do this. As a result of them following her instructions, she nearly killed everyone with chlorine gas poisoning.
Oops. Yeah,
just pour a lot of chlorine on it. It'll be absolutely fine. It's not a good start for a scientist.
Yeah, I suppose. Like, was she like a chemist scientist? Or
she was very much a chemist scientist. She was like top of the school, and you nearly poisoned. I mean, it might not have been a mistake. She might have just been trying to kill the kids.
That's I mean, maybe they're little shits. I don't know.
Yeah, she's head girl. She can do what she wants. It's the start of her murderous reign. Roberts graduated from Oxford University in 1947 with a second-class honours. She didn't do so well. It was all a blow. Second-class honours in chemistry. And in 1950, she also received a Masters of Arts degree from Oxford University. They're English kids. It would be a mercy killing. Oh, that's so harsh, Toasty. We didn't say that, YouTube. That was a comment. Later in life, she was reportedly prouder of becoming the first prime minister with a science degree than of becoming the first female prime minister.
Okay.
Interesting take, I think.
I mean, I don't know. It's cool either way.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, to be fair though, if she doesn't know how chlorine gas is made, it's not really real.
You can breathe chlorine gas, right? No, Margaret, we can't. So yeah, she's actually a very good chemist in fairness to her, and I can see that like she throughout her life she basically considered herself a scientist who happened to have gotten into politics. Basically. And that is, you can breathe it in, just not for very long. And she did other stuff as well, which we'll get to, but she genuinely considered herself a scientist for quite the vast majority of her life, rather than a prime minister.
I mean, it is a cool feat to have.
Oh yeah,
somebody with that kind of knowledge and education doing something rather than a lawyer.
Sure. And it is true that the vast majority of people in politics are lawyers or incredibly wealthy. So for her to be like a middle-class scientist, it's a little bit of and a woman, it's bucking a bunch of conventions. So I can kind of see where she's coming from with that one. During her time at Oxford, Roberts was noted for her isolated and serious attitude. Her first boyfriend, Tony Bray, recalled that she was very thoughtful and a very good conversationalist. That's probably what interested me. She was good at general subjects, because that's what college kids were chasing and drooling over in the 1940s. Conversation, not pussy.
That's what all college kids are chasing after.
Oh, what they call it. Chat with that woman.
Yep.
Oh. Roberts joined the local Conservative Association in 1948 as a representative of the University Graduate Conservative Association, or UGACA. That's a terrible acronym. Meanwhile, she became a high-ranking affiliate of the Vermin Club.
The Vermin Club?
The Vermin Club. And there she, wow, she's kind of young there. Yeah. Doing the Churchill pose.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I don't think that's a good haircut for her. Her forehead looks fucking enormous. Yeah, this is a big old forehead. Good mouth doesn't necessarily mean good head. So let me tell you about the Vermin Club. It's a group of grassroots conservatives formed in response to a derogatory comment made by Aneurin Bevan. Aneurin Bevan, for people who don't know, Nye Bevan is probably either the most famous or the second most famous Welsh politician of all time. He created the NHS. So that's his contribution to society. Free healthcare for hundreds of millions of people over the last 60, 70 years.
Not a bad contribution there.
Not a bad contribution. And Thatcher belonged to an organization that was in opposition to him. So I think you might be on the wrong side of history with that one, Margaret. That's not good.
But I mean, it costs so much money.
It does. And poor people have to pay the same as rich people? Can't be having that. At a dinner following her formal adoption of Conservative candidate for Dartford in February 1949, she met divorcee Dennis Thatcher, a successful and wealthy businessman who drove her to her Essex train. It's very gentlemanly.
Took her to the train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, a bunch of stuff about Dennis Thatcher. Genuinely a wonderful man. Patience of a saint. Really good dad. Put his entire career on hold to support her and actually paid. I'll get to it in a bit. He paid for her to study the bar. So he paid her through training as a barrister. So,
well, that's
really
good catch.
Really good catch. He was very well liked by people in the Tory party. He was a good leveling force on her. He was able to calm Thatcher down when she got fuming, which was basically every day. And he was also a war veteran and like helped with the Allied invasion of Italy. So yeah, kind of a cool guy, but he married Margaret Thatcher, so maybe he's a saint now. And after their first meeting, she described him to her sister Muriel as not a very attractive creature. Great way to start. Very reserved, but quite nice. Which is, I mean, that's Margaret Thatcher's version of fuck it. You could drown a puppy in my underwear right now. I mean, that's her version of that.
Your glowing review, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I want to jump his bones. He's quite nice. So in preparation,
quite nice and really good at conversation.
Yeah, but he's not a very attractive creature. In preparation for the election, Margaret Thatcher moved to Dartford. Hopefully, I'm glad she did. She was running for the election there, while she supported herself by working as a research chemist for J. Lyons and Co. in Hammersmith, reportedly as part of a team developing emulsifiers for ice cream. That sounds like fun, even though it's chemistry.
Making the stuff to make ice cream?
Emulsification processes for ice cream, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
That's like, although having worked in an ice cream parlor when I was a teenager, I can tell you that shit gets old fast because you've got to sample every batch to make sure it's okay. And after 4 months of sampling 5-6 batches a day, like a full spoonful, I was eating the saltiest fucking food every day just to I can't eat any more sweet stuff.
That would be terrible to take away my ice cream.
I didn't eat ice cream for like a few years after that, and it took an IV injection of Haagen-Dazs to finally get me back on track, I think.
I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, I'm back on the good stuff now. Roberts and Thatcher married at Wesley's Chapel in December 1951, and her children were baptized there as well. But she and her husband began attending Church of England services and would later convert to Anglicanism. The fucking scandal. Converting from Wesleyan Methodist to Church of England. What the fuck are neighbors going to say? No, it's not.
Oh, okay. I don't know any of that.
No, it's like, I guess in the 50s, it would have been like, oh my God, C of E from Methodism, you're basically a papist. And like, you know, you might as well just go and be a Catholic and stuff. And it's like, it's no fucking big deal, really. You know, people are still not able to eat fresh fruit in this country at this time. But yeah, Margaret Thatcher's gone over to the Church of England. I'm sure it was a big scandal. In 1951 and 50 and 51 general elections, there were two very close together. Thatcher was the Conservative candidate for the very safe Labour seat of Dartford. The local party selected her as its candidate because, though not a dynamic public speaker, Roberts was well prepared for and fearless in her answers. A prospective candidate, Bill Deeds, recalled, once she opened her mouth, the rest of us began to look second-rate, which... it's quite a good compliment.
Yeah. She's talking, you look dumb.
She's very intelligent. She's articulate. She hits the facts. And she's not charismatic. She's not a preacher like her dad. But she is hitting home the important points, which is probably something you could do. I mean, that's what Lincoln did. Lincoln, charismatic when he needed to be, but his main strength was hitting the points that he needed to hit and getting the fuck out of there. You know, the What's that famous speech?
The Gettysburg Address.
Gettysburg Address. It's like 2.5 minutes long, if that. It's super short. So, whereas the mayor of Gettysburg, who'd been fucking rambling on for like 45 minutes before him, was like, I should have done that. What the fuck's the matter with me? So
she's a good orator.
She is. She knows what to say.
Okay.
She's not Churchill. She's not charismatic. She's not Martin Luther King. She's not inspiring. She is pragmatic and effective, which from a politician at the time, that's what you want. You don't want fluff and lies. You want, this is what I'm going to do to fix it. You know?
Okay.
And that's what worked in the 50s. Now what works is I'm going to get rid of a bunch of immigrants or something. Which,
well, I guess that's what people are going to do to fix it.
Apparently. Anyway, so what they also don't tell you about her speaking here is around this time she started deliberately pitching her voice lower and talking with a very posh accent. She's from Lincolnshire, which is not, I mean, it's not poor, but it's definitely not home county super posh.
Okay.
So she lowered her voice and started speaking like this.
So,
which con artist comes to mind when?
Yeah, I was thinking Theranos all of a sudden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She did the Elizabeth Holmes trick of trying to be more authoritative by talking like this, when actually her normal voice was not quite as punctual and, you know, enunciative and all of that other stuff. She was kind of just a normal lady, but then she just pitched it down here and started speaking like this, and the lady's not turning and all of that shit. So it was a smart move. It worked because she's in the world of men and she started talking like one, basically. So
sometimes I wonder if it was done on purpose or if it's just something like you just pick up an accent.
The accent thing is entirely possible. You know, she moved around a lot, so her accent may have gotten muddled. But there was a thing in this country, basically up until I went to school, where people had elocution lessons. And it's why my accent isn't Welsh, because both of my parents had elocution lessons, and that taught them to speak like a BBC announcer from the 1950s, because nobody is allowed regional accent. You have to all sound like all posh and announcing stuff. And as a result, their accents changed. My mother's Manchester accent disappeared. My father's South and North Wales accent disappeared, and met in the middle. And that's what I was raised in. So I now have a nowhere accent because of that. So elocution lessons were a thing. And people weren't taught, you know, you got to stop talking like that, Governor. It sounds like a fucking Alfie rocker. You've got to start talking like this, and you've got to be posh, and you've got to be correct. And nobody really talks like this, but you have to talk like this. So
I see.
That's what she did.
Gosh, you can do all kinds of different accents. I can't do that. I just sound like this. Sometimes I sound like I'm from Minnesota.
Yeah, it's because I'm secretly a spy. I need to blend in. Basically, she's putting on the accent, and she's also really lowering the pitch of her voice so that people pay attention. And it worked. She attracted media attention as the youngest and only female candidate in the 1950 election, and she was the youngest Conservative candidate in the country. So she lost. Yeah, I mean, that's another big achievement for her. She lost on both occasions to Norman Dodds, but reduced the Labour majority by 7,000 votes, which is a pretty decent margin. She cut it in half, basically, the majority, which for a safe Labour seat or a safe any seat to cut their majority in half, that's like quite a big achievement. As mentioned earlier, Dennis funded his wife's studies for the bar. She qualified as a barrister in 1953 and specialised in taxation. Really useful if you're going to be involved in government later down the line, if you know tax law. Holy shit.
It seems like that would be something that's important.
For sure, yeah, especially when you're going to fuck around with taxes as much as she did. Later the same year, her twins, their twins, I should say. Oh, my ear's getting crushed. Later that same year, the twins Carol and Mark were born, delivered prematurely by cesarean section. So that's why Mark was always getting lost. It's like leaving your friend's house and throwing yourself out of the window instead of opening the door. So yeah, we covered Mark Thatcher in season 1, episode 22, I think.
Yeah.
21. Yeah. So if you go back 3 seasons, you can see what we talked about Mark Thatcher and
His
the fucking
racing
idiot that he was.
skills.
And his incredible racing skills that got him so lost, the Algerian Air Force had to be fucking called out. And also, he kind of launched a coup d'etat against a democratically elected government, but it's only a Thatcher. I mean, that's not the worst anyone's done. So, after yet another defeat in the 1954 general election, Thatcher began looking at a conservative safe seat because she had a bit of influence now. So she's like, put me somewhere where I'm going to win. It's going to be a big boost to your government. Here we go. Hayden McCallum. Methodists were fiery in the 20s and 30s when Margaret Thatcher was a little girl. You see, I didn't know that because my version of Methodism is very much birthed from the 60s and 70s and 80s. So chilled, laid back. Let's get out the acoustic guitars, that sort of thing. That sort of Methodism. So, yeah.
Valuable input.
Thank you for that, Hayden. That was good to know. I didn't know that. So she was elected. She's now in a. Oh, there she is. Holy shit!
In the 50s.
In the 50s. Look at her out on the trail, and she really dressed up for that. And she's in a fucking church hall. It looks very. It looks like she's in a noir thriller. For some reason.
Does.
A fucking grizzled detective novel right here. So she got her wish and she was put into a safe seat in Finchley in April 1958. She was elected as an MP for the seat after a hard campaign in the 1959 general election. Thatcher's talent and drive caused her to be mentioned as a future prime minister even as early as her early 20s. Although she herself was more pessimistic, stating as late as 1970, 9 years before she was elected as prime minister, there will not be a woman prime minister in my lifetime. The male population is too prejudiced. I mean, she's not wrong. It's 50s and 60s and 70s were a very prejudiced time for women, even after women's liberation.
She still pulled it off, though.
She did. And more power to her because she was not wrong. That is a male-dominated society, working environment. Incredible that she did that.
You think it was the lower voice?
I think it was talking like this. You're all right, mate. I'm fucking Margaret Thatcher. In October 1961, she was promoted to the front bench as Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry for Pensions by Harold Macmillan. Thatcher was the youngest woman in history to receive such a post and among the first MPs elected in the 1959 election to be promoted. So she was top pick for his cabinet of like in America, you have Secretary of State, you have all of the other positions. There's a similar thing over here, but she was like second or third on the list of like, we want this person. They're a superstar. They're going in the cabinet. So that's really interesting.
And she's in her 20s.
She's in her 20s. They are grooming her for the top job at this point already. They're like, there's so much potential in this woman. She's intelligent. She's got multiple qualifications. She's got experience in like a middle class background, so she can relate to people who might be converted as Tory voters. It was an incredibly smart move by the party to start grooming her for bigger things, really.
It's almost like they started grooming her back when she was a head girl.
Basically, yeah. I mean, when she was trying to poison her colleagues. So after the Conservatives lost the 1964 election, she became spokeswoman on housing and land. In that position, she advocated for her party's policy of giving tenants the right to buy their council houses. We'll get to that later. That was a fucking disaster. Yeah. So in 1968, Enoch Powell delivered his Rivers of Blood speech in which he strongly criticized Commonwealth immigration to the United Kingdom and the then proposed race relations bill. When Ted Heath, the leader of the Tory party, telephoned Margaret Thatcher to inform her that he would sack Enoch Powell from the shadow cabinet, she recalled that she really thought it was better to let things cool down for the present rather than heighten the crisis, and years later reflected that Enoch Powell made a valid argument. So let me tell you about that valid argument that we're talking about. And any speech called the Rivers of Blood, probably not so good. Especially
I
back
was
in
going
the
to say, how's a Rivers of Blood a valid argument? Like, I feel like that's okay. Go
It's
ahead.
exactly what you think it is. So Enoch Powell was a Tory MP for around Wolverhampton, where I live. He was very populist, which means I'll basically appeal to the baser instincts of the voters. If I, in response to one of his constituents saying, if I had the money to go, I wouldn't stay in this country. In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. This is what one of his constituents said. Instead of going, you're out of your fucking mind, what is wrong with you? Powell said, here is a decent, ordinary fellow Englishman who is in broad daylight in my own town, says to me, his member of parliament, that the country will not be worth living in for his children. I simply do not have the right to shrug my shoulders and think about something else. What he is saying, thousands and hundreds of thousands are saying and thinking, not throughout Great Britain perhaps, but in the areas that are already undergoing the total transformation to which there is no parallel in 1,000 years of English history. That's a complete fucking lie, but, go with it. Yeah, there's Enoch Powell. He looks vaguely evil, in fairness. So
a little bit.
Yeah, a little tiny bit evil. So those whom the gods wish to destroy, this is such a weird speech, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are for the most part the material of the future growth of the immigrant descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaging in heaping up its own funeral pyre. Fuck me. So insane are we that we actually permit unmarried persons to immigrate for the purpose of founding a family with spouses and fiancés whom they have never seen. That's what he said. That's some of it. Anyway, he went on, and it did include, there's Enoch Powell.
Probably while he was writing that.
Yeah, he's a hand waver. That's who he is. But of course, Thatcher thought he made a valid argument for racism. That argument is the same shit, horrible shit that people have been saying for hundreds of years. It's always the same fucking argument. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny, and it isn't bore out through history. There are no fucking rivers of blood in the UK, even though people will say, "Oh, there's no-go areas in London." It's a complete lie. I've walked around London, the West Midlands, all over the country at like 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk out of my fucking brain, never had any trouble. And I'm not an impressive human being. I'm not. So it's fear-mongering because it'll get you claps and applause and you'll get elected. That's all it is. That's all it ever is. And if they genuinely believe it, then it's just fucking sad. So Thatcher thought he made some good points. So there's a fucking early warning sign. The Conservative Party, led by Ted Heath, won the 1970 general election, and Thatcher was appointed to the cabinet as Secretary of State for Education and Science, which is kind of a perfect appointment for her. Yeah, science, education. Not necessarily education, but science for sure, and implementing that in schools. Really smart appointment for me.
Yeah, I mean, education goes, I think, with science. If you spend enough time to get a chemist degree, you've had quite a bit of education. You're familiar with it.
And she's got a master's degree as well. And also, at the time in the UK in post-war, we lost so many men and women to the bombing, to the war, that actually the next generation of scientists needed to be educated and recruited through schools. So there was a big drive for that in the UK. But during her first months in office, she attracted public attention when, while administering public expenditure cuts on the state education system, because she's a conservative, she's going to fucking cut funding to everything. One of the first things she abolished, like the first thing out the gate, was free milk for school children aged 7 to 11.
Oh.
She held that few children would suffer in schools were charged for if schools were charged for milk, but agreed to provide younger children with 0.3 imperial pints, so like one of those fucking tiny cartons, daily for nutritional purposes. So their fucking bones didn't snap in half. So Margaret Thatcher, brah, taking milk from kids, brah. Holy shit. She's a Dickensian villain already. Like, that's her first thing in the job. And she went on to say, she's like, well, this wasn't my choice. I didn't want to do it. It was part of the government. Like, you're the fucking Secretary of State for that shit. So I think you've got a cool little picture there of I had milk in school. You know, we were poor enough to be able to have that shit. So there you go. This is milk being handed out. It was usually in the morning. They would only give it out when, you know, you were kind of halfway through the first part of the day in school. And I have fond memories of that. I think it's a good thing. I know that the milk, there's a whole milk lobby and stuff, but you know, kids had such poor nutritional standards in the UK at the time because rationing was still going right through the 50s that milk for kids was an important thing for their development. So there she is, about to steal milk from that poor fucking child. Her decision provoked a storm of protest from Labour and the press, leading to her being notoriously nicknamed Margaret Thatcher Milk Snatcher, which is about as perfect a put down as you can ever get. I love it. It's a great name, and whoever came up with that deserves a fucking Nobel Prize. Have we got a cartoon? Have we got a little cartoon of Milk Snatcher? Oh, that's so cool. Oh, we lost it. That's okay. She reportedly, because of the backlash, and here's a picture of the snatchering as you really, if you're not watching on YouTube or on Spotify, please go on, because you can see a really cool little thing. It's Margaret Thatcher. So that picture, I think, is of the child snatcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang with Thatcher's face on it. Which, by the way, if anyone's ever seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, that film it's pretty fucked up. It's pretty weird anyway. Flying car, all of that stuff. But the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is one of the most genuinely terrifying things in human history ever created. It was played by a ballet dancer, so he moved really fucking weird. And he's got candy all over his hands. He's got like a massive big black top hat, and he's going, children. It's just so fucking creepy. It's horrible. I've got sweeties. Oh my God, get the fuck away from me. She reportedly considered leaving politics in the aftermath of the backlash, and later wrote in her biography, I learned a valuable lesson. I'd incurred the maximum of political odium for the minimum of political benefit, which translated from posh twat means I played myself.
Is that what that translates from?
I fucked myself. Yeah. Ted Heath's Conservative government continued to experience difficulties with oil embargoes. So that would be the oil crisis that we got in the 70s, led to a 4-day working week, or even 3-day working week. There were hours in the UK. The working week was cut down because people just there wasn't enough oil to get people to and from work and shit. There were blackouts rolling throughout the day. There was a bunch of strikes, and shit was piling up in the streets because, you know, the garbage guys were on strike. It was all covered in the filth and the fury, the Sex Pistols documentary, how the government was falling apart. And subsequently, they lost the 1974 general election because people were starting to lose work. They couldn't even turn the fucking lights on at night. You know, it was back to by candlelight. And like, well, we survived the Blitz. 30 years later, you're telling us we still can't have our fucking lights on. Yeah, we're not going to stick around for that. So
yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, denying people food is one thing, but to take away their lights as well.
So God, could you imagine if they had internet back then?
Yeah,
would have been riots.
I know, or oxygen. Like, they'd have fucking taxed the shit out of that as well. Labour formed a minority government and went on to win a narrow majority in the October 1974 general election, and Ted Heath's leadership of the Conservative Party looked increasingly in doubt. Thatcher was not initially seen as the obvious replacement, but she eventually became the main challenger, promising a fresh start. Her main support came from the parliamentary 1922 committee, which is a powerful cabal of Conservative backbench MPs. I should point out what a backbench MP is.
Yeah.
In Parliament, you have rows of seats, obviously, and your main team, your cabinet, your kind of Secretary for Health, your fucking economics guy, all of these people, they're on the front bench. And because, you know, you're having these one-on-one debates every day Prime Minister's Question Times, debates in the Commons, stuff like that. Every single fucking day it goes on, votes, all of that shit, like the Senate. The backbenchers are the ones that, they've been voted in from, I don't know, bumblefuck New Hampshire or Northamptonshire or whatever you want to call it. And they are an MP, but they don't have a cabinet position. So they're just there to represent the interests of their constituents and their local area, but they don't have a point. These people don't have a lot of power because they don't have cabinet positions, but they all get together in a big little cabal, like the 1922 committee, which is really fucking menacing. They actually have a lot of power because they can vote on government policy, on who the next appointee in this position is, on who the leader is. All of a sudden, you get 50 or 60 backbenchers together, and that's like a third of your government voting in one direction. So it's very powerful.
What about that? There you go. Strength and power.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a school of fish. You ain't catching any of these fuckers. So her main support for her parliamentary campaign came from the 1922 committee and the Spectator magazine, which is still published today and is very much a right-leaning magazine. But Thatcher's time in office gave her the reputation of a pragmatist rather than that of an ideologue. She was someone who was seen as a reformer. She could make a difference, whereas the Tories had fucking kept people's lights off and shit, so they weren't seen as very useful. So she defeated Ted Heath on the first ballot, and he resigned from leadership immediately. In the second ballot, she defeated Willie Whitelaw, Ted Heath's preferred successor. FYI, if you Google Willie Whitelaw, you'll either get a racist porn star or you'll get the actual person who looks like the most stereotypical British politician ever. You look at a picture of Willie Whitelaw and you go, yeah, he's a conservative politician from the 1960s and 70s. Like, he looks like he...
am I going to come up with, though, is the question. Which one am I putting
Either's
on the
acceptable, screen? Really. What Willie Whitelaw? What a fucking name! Why couldn't he have just gone by Bill? Why Willie?
Because it's got to be Willie. Slick Willie.
It is. Slick Willie Whitelaw. Thatcher's election had a polarizing effect on the party. Her support was stronger amongst MPs on the right of the Conservative Party, which were the people who were basically two shades of black away from wearing Hugo Boss SS uniforms. So there we go. Willie Whitelaw. If that doesn't look like a British politician, I don't know what does. Either that or a fucking boxer. You take that suit off, it looks like he could punch anyone in the mouth. Jesus.
Yeah. Jeez. He didn't look less politician-y as he got older either.
No, he looked more politician-y as he got older. He was like, yeah, this is a man who could decide whether or not I have control over my body anymore. That's for sure. That's how much of a politician he looks like. So the people who supported Thatcher were people on the right of the Conservative Party, and and the people against her were those Conservatives who had not attended public school, private school, or Oxford or Cambridge, which, as they're also known, is 99% of the British population. So basically, she only had support from extreme right-wingers and very rich people.
Okay.
So those were the people that got her into the position as the leader of the Conservative. They weren't government at the time, but the Conservative Party. Television critic Clive James, writing in The Observer prior to her election as Conservative leader, compared her voice during her initial speeches at the conference to that of a cat sliding down a blackboard, which... That's a lovely way of putting it, Clive. Thatcher began attending lunches regularly at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the IEA, a think tank founded by Hayekian poultry magnate Anthony Fisher. It's a chicken farmer. He's got chickens. Chicken. I want to stay on the fucking economic affairs of the country because I farm chickens. The institute focuses usually focused in on policies which included less government, lower taxes for the wealthy, trickle-down economics, neoliberal economic ideas at home and abroad, and almost complete freedom from regulation and taxation for businesses. It's basically everything that's doomed the current Western world as it is now. So, yeah, we can thank the Institute of Economic Affairs for basically that shit show. The Labour government then faced fresh public unease about the direction of the country and a damaging series of strikes during the winter of 1978 to 79, dubbed the Winter of Discontent. Borrowed from Shakespeare, because we have quite a few of those discontent winters in the UK. It's just so fucking rainy all the time. The Conservatives attacked the Labour government's unemployment record. And I've got to point out, this is one of the best things. Before we get to that, you've got a picture here of Margaret Thatcher.
Just her quote.
I'd love this. She comes out with some brilliant quotes that you look back on and you think, you're fucking insane. The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. That's not how socialism works, Margaret. Never mind. But so the Conservatives attacked the Labour government's unemployment record using advertising slogans and billboards, really effective billboards, with the slogan, "Labour isn't working." It was probably the most successful advertising campaign in British political history.
I mean, it's catchy.
It's incredibly catchy. It's very clever. And it was featured, the billboards featured images of people queuing in a long line that would snake off into the distance with the slogan, "Labour isn't working." Everybody got it immediately, and that's all they needed to say. People were already thinking that, and the general election was basically decided with that. A general election was called after the Callaghan ministry lost a motion of no confidence in early 1979. The Conservatives won a 44-seat majority in the House of Commons, and Thatcher became the first female British Prime Minister. And we've got a picture of that billboard now. That is a striking image, you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that, I mean, marketing. So...
yeah. I think they use Saatchi and Saatchi for that, which is an actual advertising agency. I could be wrong, but I think that was who they approached to do that. So I'd be really interested to find out if that was who they used. So Margaret Thatcher is now in power. So I think the best way to do it, in a sort of chronological order, as well as looking at stuff, is to look at her stance on stuff and her performance while Prime Minister. Here's a quote from her on immigration. "The British character has done so much for democracy, for law, and done so much throughout the world that if there is any fear that it might be swamped by people who are going to react and be rather hostile to those things coming in, as well as, in many ways, minorities add to the richness and the variety of the country." That's well said. Really good. She was a tobacconist and the daughter of a tobacconist and a greengrocer. She would have seen a lot of communities around her, so she was aware of that. She then went on to say, "The moment the minority threatens to become a big one, people get frightened," which is entirely accurate to the reaction a lot of people have to minorities. They see more people in their area that they don't recognize, no matter where they come from, and immediately they get a bit scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens, unfortunately. I've never had that reaction myself, no matter where I've lived. And I've lived in places for years and years at a time, and I've never been like, there's a lot more of this group, because you just don't, if you're not in that mindset, you just genuinely don't notice it, to be honest.
I think the only time that I really had that happen is when this family of bears moved in. Got a little nervous. They were rooting through the trash all the time, but they moved on.
They took our jobs. So it's entirely accurate to say that. But the only thing is that she weaponized it, because the support for far-right parties at the time, things like the National Front, Combat 18, I think it was, these really basically terrorist organizations, that support dwindled once the people voting for those parties realized that Margaret Thatcher was essentially on their side. In there's no other way of putting it, she was. In the 1979 general election, the Conservatives, who attracted votes from the National Front, whose support almost collapsed, In July 1979, in a meeting with Foreign Secretary Lord Carrington and Home Secretary William Whitelaw, so it's good old Willie Whitelaw, Thatcher objected to the number of Asian immigrants in the context of limiting the total number of Vietnamese boat people, as she put it, allowed to settle in the UK to fewer than 10,000 over 2 years. She doesn't know the war's over, right? It's 1979. Fuck, dude.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I just don't understand on why you would limit like specific areas, or like, hey, fuck these particular people in general.
Yeah.
I guess I don't.
Vietnamese people? Like, what the fuck? That's really, really specific, Margaret. What happened to you?
Who needs help right now? Ah.
Yeah. What the fuck, dude? The Viet Cong are not a thing anymore. Michael Chey, the Queen's press secretary, leaked stories. This is a relationship with the Queen now. He leaked stories of a deep rift between the Queen and Margaret Thatcher to the Sunday Times in 1986. He said that the Queen felt that Thatcher's policies were uncaring, confrontational, and socially divisive. That's about as accurate a description as I've ever heard of Margaret Thatcher, to be honest with you. That's very well said. Thatcher later wrote, I always found the Queen's attitude towards the work of the government absolutely correct. Stories of clashes between two powerful women were just too good not to make up. I don't know if they clashed, but I don't know if they really, let's go and, let's go out and have lunch, or let's go out and do it. Like, I don't think they were chummy.
Yeah, no Sunday Funday brunches.
No, they have, so the Prime Minister and the Queen, or the monarch, have weekly meetings. Every single week they get together, they have a cup of tea, and the king or queen is like, so what have you been doing, and it's because the king and queen, and it's true about the Queen, is seen as someone who has seen so much of politics in the world and different administrations that actually she can listen and be a little bit of a kind of a counselor. I don't know about Charles, but that's definitely useful, but I don't think Thatcher liked being summoned to the fucking palace every week and be like, I could have done so much other stuff with this time. So she wasn't happy about it. Together with her first chancellor, Geoffrey Howe, she lowered direct taxes on income and increased indirect taxes. So she put up a bunch of other stuff. She introduced the poll tax. The poll tax was basically her way of getting the country out the doldrums. The poll tax was more money per month than I am currently paying in council tax in 2024. Okay. 40 years later.
Wow.
There were immediate riots.
Okay.
Yeah, and people basically across the country tried to burn the fucking country down because they weren't paying the poll tax, and the poll tax riots happened for years. Oof. So it was a terrible time. It was the first massive financial misstep of her premiership. But look at the Queen. Queen don't look so happy. There, Thatcher's fine, but the Queen's like, oh, this shit. The Queen looks like she's stifling a fart, to be honest, but she always does. So the poll tax was a massive failure for her, and the council tax came in soon afterwards, which is how we pay for things like bin collection and roads and services and things like that, like local services, libraries,
important things,
important stuff, important civic things. And I do not have a problem paying council tax. I don't have a problem paying national insurance so that everyone in this country can have access to free healthcare. I think it's fucking brilliant. I don't mind taking £8 a week out of my pay packet for that. That's fine. So that wasn't necessarily the case for everyone, though. She increased interest rates to slow the growth of the money supply and thereby lower inflation. She introduced cash limits on public spending and reduced expenditure on social services such as education and housing. Because who really needs free education and housing, really? Oh, the poor? Well, they don't vote for her anyway, except the racist ones. They fucking love her. Cuts to higher education led to Thatcher being the first Oxonian post-war prime minister without an honorary doctorate from Oxford University after a 738 to 319 vote of the governing assembly and student petition to not grant her an honorary doctorate. That's the kind of government majority she could only dream of, to be honest. Yeah. Because she cut funding to higher education. So they're like,
yeah, no
fuck
doctorate
you,
for
lady.
you.
Yeah, no doctorate, no special honor for you. She didn't care. Thatcher's job approval rating fell to 23% by December 1980. Yeah, lower than any previous prime minister in UK history. And I just want to point out we've had parliamentary democracy for 800 years. So she was not popular. That being said, George Bush sometimes could only dream of those fucking numbers. Yeah. The recession of the early 1980s deepened. She increased taxes, which, as you can imagine, was super popular with everyone.
Yeah. Everybody had all kinds of money to pay taxes at that time, I imagine.
Yeah, unemployment's at 3 million. You know, it's at fucking 12%. That's just take all that money, lady. You know, by 1982, the UK began to experience signs of economic recovery. Inflation was down to 8.6% from a high of 18%, which is fucking crazy. But unemployment was over 3 million for the first time since 1930.
Oh,
what happened around that time?
Wow.
Oh yeah, massive fucking worldwide economic depression.
So
the woman who's supposed to be good at business is kind of fucking everyone up. Really.
Gosh, there she goes with her cleaning the floors theory again.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like basically put up the taxes for everyone, introduce other taxes, raise unemployment. It's the only way is up because I've put us right at the bottom. So
there you go.
Yeah. However, she was about to be handed the lifeline of a lifetime in the form of a really stupid invasion and a quite short and effective massacre of people from South America. So on the 2nd of April 1982, the ruling military junta in Argentina ordered the invasion of the British overseas territories of the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, triggering the Falklands War. The subsequent crisis was a defining moment of Thatcher's premiership. At the suggestion of Harold Macmillan and Robert Armstrong, she set up and chaired a small war cabinet called the ODSA, ODSA, Overseas and Defense Committee, South Atlantic, to oversee the conduct of the war, which by the 5th to the 6th of April had authorized and dispatched a naval task force to retake the islands. We went over there with an aircraft carrier, with a bunch of ships, nothing special, and a bunch of Harrier jets and a couple of nuclear submarines for special effect. And the Falklands, I just want to point out, really close to Argentina. They're basically right off the coast. So the Argentine Air Force had planes that were faster, that had a 50% higher ceiling on the altitude they could reach. They had better weaponry. And this is because we were using Harrier jets. So the Harriers are amazing because they don't need a runway to take off. They can just fucking float up and off they go.
Right.
So we took twice as many planes as them because they didn't have that many. They had better planes, but they had half as many. And also, the Argentine Air Force hadn't really had many wars at that point, whereas our Air Force had been constantly fighting in various engagements for the last 100 years. So
little bit of experience, yeah.
Yeah, and also there were a bunch of casualties on the UK side. Our military was very well drilled, and also the cannons from our ships could go 50% longer than theirs. So it was just like a bully holding off a kid with the head, and then punch in the air, sort of thing. Yeah. Also, we had 2 fucking submarines, so they were kind of fucked. Argentina surrendered on the 14th of June, so just a couple of months later, and Operation Corporate was hailed a success. Of course, she called it Operation Corporate, notwithstanding the deaths of 255 British servicemen and 3 Falkland Islanders who were killed by the invading Argentine forces. Argentine fatalities totaled 650. Half of them after the nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror torpedoed and sank the cruiser ARA General Belgrano on the 2nd of May under direct orders from Thatcher herself, because she had to kind of override what was going on because the vessel was sailing away. It was running away from the combat zone into international waters, and she made the call to sink the Belgrano, and they all fucking died. So...
Shot him in the back?
Yeah.
Ooh.
You know how that thing about Custer's Last Stand, where Custer's like supposedly in all the pictures, like he's in a circle and he's got all the native warriors are kind of riding around him and picking his men off, and he's fighting to the last man. And historical figures have pointed out that that wasn't necessarily accurate, and that actually there's a trail of bullets running away from the campsite. So they were effectively running away and they were mowed down anyway. That's what she did here. She's like, you're not going to fucking run away from a fight, you bitch. Get back over here. And she sunk a massive warship with the submarine. So very useful. And you got a picture here of, is that Thatcher in a...
Yeah, she's not letting them run away. She's chasing them down.
This is her fucking deck of an aircraft carrier mission accomplished picture, isn't it? That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking hell. That is a terrible picture, Margaret. What the hell were you thinking? Anyway, we won the Falklands War. Kind of unfair to begin with, really. And there she is, probably saying no to someone again.
This is where she was like, hey, go get that boat that's running away.
Yeah, can you go and kill everyone on that boat that's running away from us, please? I want to strike fear into the hearts. Yeah, exactly. Also, that jacket, oh, so cool. The Falklands factor and a slight economic recovery beginning early in 1982 and a bitterly divided opposition all contributed to Margaret Thatcher's second election victory in 1983. Thatcher frequently referred to the war as the Falklands spirit, and Hastings and Jenkins suggest that this reflected her preference for the streamlined decision-making of her war cabinet as a preference over the painstaking deal-making of peacetime cabinet government. Damn democracy, always getting in the way of a strong leader with no oversight.
Yeah, yeah. It just slows shit down, man.
I know. Let's just get rid of it all and let her do whatever the fuck she wants. Despite saying that she was in favor of peaceful negotiations to end apartheid in South Africa, Margaret Thatcher opposed sanctions on South Africa by the Commonwealth and the European Economic Community, the forerunner to the European Union. She attempted to preserve trade with South Africa while persuading its government to abandon apartheid. This included casting herself as President Francois Botha's candid friend and inviting him to visit the UK in 1984 for tea and crumpets. And can we stop marginalising people in your country? Is that okay? She did that because she was fucking desperate and she needed the trade. So it wasn't because she wanted to end apartheid. She was getting good money.
Okay.
Yeah. That's going to be a common theme with her. She didn't care. Yeah. By 1984, unemployment had increased again to 3.3 million, the highest number in history, because Thatcher had decimated the manufacturing industry in the UK. That meant that anywhere north of London was basically fucked at this point, because they were all regional manufacturing hubs that sent their products to London and around the rest of the world and to the south. And she dismantled those industries one by one.
Well,
in favor of a service-based economy.
It's not like that's important, because
it's not. You need to make stuff.
Everybody can just do service, and then
everyone can be in a call center. Why not? Just a nation of call center operators.
That makes ever.
Yeah, and don't make anything. We'll just import it all from. I don't know. It doesn't matter, does it? No one's caring. She was committed to reducing the power of the unions as well, whose leadership she accused of undermining parliamentary democracy and economic performance through strike action. In fairness, she did have a point at certain points in the 70s, with the bin strike and, the oil crisis and stuff like that. The unions were very powerful and they were wielding that power really dangerously. But she did a massive overcorrection and basically wiped them out. So, yeah.
It always the pendulum always swings too far the other way. Like
Yeah.
always.
The correction is too big, and it needed moderation. It needed steady negotiation, and what she resorted to was actual violence. Several unions launched strikes in response to legislation introduced to limit their power, but resistance eventually collapsed. According to the BBC's political correspondent in 2004, Thatcher managed to destroy the power of the trade unions for almost a generation. That's actually inaccurate. It's never fully recovered in this country. We don't really have... Yeah, we've got unions, but they are not what they used to be. You know, I think the main ones are teachers, police, and healthcare workers. Nobody else really has unions anymore. It's just those three groups.
Damn.
Yeah, and they don't have any power at all. They can help you a little bit, but not massively.
See, I think, we've got police unions here that probably are the most powerful unions that I know of.
Yeah.
Besides,
baseball
auto
umpires.
workers. Yeah, besides the baseball umpires union.
They never get fired. They can stay in that fucking job until they're basically blind and being wheeled out onto the field.
And they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, Angel Gonzalez. Was it Angel Gonzalez? Covered him in an episode.
Yes, and now I'm. It's not Gonzalez. Angel Fernandez.
Angel Fernandez.
Yeah.
It doesn't narrow it down when I say the shit one, does it? Because it's quite a few bad umpires. So the miners' strike of 1984 to 85 was the biggest and most devastating confrontation between the unions and the Thatcher government. In 1984, the National Coal Board, NCB, proposed to close 20 of the 174 state-owned mines and cut 20,000 jobs out of the 187,000. Two-thirds of the country's miners, led by the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, under Arthur Scargill, who's a legendary figure in the UK for fighting back against Thatcher's government. He physically fought back against them. They went on strike in protest. Thatcher refused to meet the union's demands, declared the strikes illegal, and compared the miners' dispute to the Falklands War. Smart. Declaring in a speech in 1984, we had to fight the enemy without in the Falklands. We always have to be aware of the enemy within, which is much more difficult to fight and more dangerous in liberty. I don't think taking away people's rights is liberty, Margaret. I think you've got a quote there as well. It pays to know the enemy, not least because sometimes you may have the opportunity to turn them into a friend. Margaret Thatcher. She never converted anyone. What the fuck are you talking about? You are not that charismatic, lady.
I'm trying to bring some positivity.
I know, and I will get to the positive stuff. Limited. So Thatcher's opponents characterized her words, as indicating contempt for the working class and have been employed in criticism of her ever since. I mean, that's fair, really. After a year out on strike in March 1985 and multiple violent clashes with authorities, specifically riot police who Thatcher sent in on every single day the strike was on for a week at one point, many of which the police were quite happy to do because the police loved Margaret Thatcher. The NUM leadership conceded without a deal, so the miners were fucked, basically. The cost to the economy was estimated to be at least £1.5 billion, which is a lot of money in the early 80s. That's 3.2 billion in 2024 money, or $4 billion.
That's today. A lot of money.
It's a lot of money for coal, remember, and that's what fueled the country at the time. This is before nuclear, renewable, any of that shit really came into force. So coal was it. Really.
Is there a lot of nuclear energy over there?
There's a few. Yeah, okay. There's one on Anglesey where I go to. It's generally well run, but we've had a couple of nuclear disasters. We've had, if you look up Sellafield, it's not quite 3 Mile Island. It's more of a steady 3 Mile Island over 10 years sort of thing. A bunch of people dying of various cancers from swimming in the sea. Not too far from Sellafield. Shit like that. And also the railway line, there was a guy called Mark Thomas, I want to say, a documentary filmmaker who, there's a railway line that brings in a bunch of fuel to Sellafield, and he went there with a Geiger counter and just followed the track, and as the closer he got to Sellafield, the fucking higher the Geiger counter got. And he sent a letter to the government and he showed it to the audience in the comedy special, and he was like, so I just sent this thing to the government. I'll read it to you. And he was like, "Dear so-and-so, can you tell me if the railway line outside of Sellafield is indeed fucked? Because the Geiger counter seems to say that it is, and that people are probably going to die." Never got a response.
Oh.
So, yeah, that whole place, if people are walking out of there with all of their limbs non-mutated, then well done. You know. Anyway, yeah, that is rough. That's why we need more wind and solar and all that shit, because it's not going to grow extra limbs. Thatcher reflected on the end of the strike in her statement that if anyone has won, it was the miners who stayed at work and all of those that kept Britain going. Yeah, because they're winners, you know, on their shit pay. The government, in a response to the strike and out of spite, closed 25 unprofitable coal mines in 1985. And by 1992, a total of 97 mines had been closed. The others that remained were privatized in 1994 and sold off to foreign investment companies. The resulting closures of 150 coal mines, some of which, well, most of which actually were not losing money, resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of jobs and have had the effect of devastating entire communities and towns where basically the pit was the only form of employment. It was either the pit or the pub were the two choices.
It's a bleak existence.
That is a bleak existence, but at least it was an existence. But when you don't have a job anymore and all you have is the pub, that brings on a whole bunch of other problems: domestic abuse, addiction, crime, antisocial behavior, the destruction of the community spirit, all sorts of things shut down. There's no money anywhere. No one's going out anymore. Just decimated massive parts of the country. This happened to millions of working class people across the manufacturing industries, including shipbuilding, steel, textiles, and automotive, all because she didn't really like trade unions and she wanted to move the UK towards a neoliberal economy that was focused on service-based stuff and trickle-down economics and get everyone a different education and, again, work in call centers. After the 1983 election, when she desperately needed money, the sale of state utilities accelerated. More than £29 billion, which is £92 billion in 2024 money, or $120 billion, was raised from the sale of nationalised industries, and another £18 billion from the sale of council houses. So, yeah, I mentioned the scheme where she wanted people to have the right to buy their own council house. Council houses are what you give people when they can't afford their own house. They get their own house, 2 or 3 bedrooms. I'm living in an ex-council house now, which I didn't buy. The previous owner bought. Basically, you are given a house, 2 or 3 bedrooms, kitchen, living room, dining room, upstairs bathroom, if you're lucky, downstairs privy, little back garden, and you can raise a family in it, and you pay £100 to £200 a month rent. And that's it. You don't pay any council. Yeah, that's it. Okay. And it was that way for years. It was probably much lower than that. It would have been like £20 to £30 a month council rent back then. But she made the decision to basically allow people in council houses to buy all of their homes at massively reduced rates because she needed to raise money. And as a result, there is a massive shortage of affordable housing in the UK. And the market is at a point where whenever anything affordable is built, it's like 5% of the development, and everything is squeezed onto a tiny spot. And the affordable homes are no longer homes. They're now like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment at £190,000. And even, you know, basically anyone under the age of 30 is unlikely to ever be able to buy their own home because of this thing. Yeah. Okay. And, you know, following governments after her just didn't build anymore. There was the space to do it, and they didn't build any. They built private homes, luxury apartments, you know, family homes and stuff. They didn't build affordable housing. So when you do have people, you know, migrants, refugees, people in difficult economic situations, homeless people needing housing, there just isn't any for them because of Thatcher, basically.
See, and that system had worked before, where there was the house available that they just provided for people. And
absolutely. And, you know, there were plenty of them. There still are in some parts of the UK. It's difficult because the waiting lists are years long. So people end up living in hotels for years and years at a time, which is less than ideal. But in the past, a family could grow up entirely in a council house and barely pay. They could afford to save money. They could go on holiday. They could afford to buy, their own food. They could grow their own food. They might have an allotment where they grew a lot of their own food, and they did well, but doesn't exist anymore. Really.
There, I think you touched on one of the things that may have been used to make people like upset at people that lived in a council house, is that you're living in a house for so cheap and then you're going on a holiday.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, I understand that.
Come on, though, but people
need a break from their lives.
Yes.
Doesn't matter who you are,
Life is hard, and just because you're barely getting by doesn't mean that you're not working really hard.
Goddamn right. And also, if someone's on minimum wage and they manage to save up enough money, them and their wife and their family, to go on holiday to somewhere else in the UK, let's say Blackpool or some like seaside town, which isn't exactly the greatest place to go. I love Blackpool and all these seaside towns, but they're not the greatest places to go on holiday. But that means the world to these families, the ability to go out and enjoy them and to have those memories made with their kids and stuff. That's a really special thing. That sort of happens, but not really anymore. And there's not the stock for council houses for people to be in a position where they can get a job, they can get promoted up that job, they can save money and buy their own house, they can have a foot on the ladder with the help of the government. And it's good for the economy to have that, because the government gets taxes from the sale and purchase of houses. But that's not really possible when there's no social housing anymore, or very little.
Okay.
So that's the situation. Anyway, the process of privatization, especially the preparation of nationalized industries for privatization, was actually associated with marked improvements in performance, particularly in terms of labor productivity, because obviously they can't just sit back and collect a paycheck. They actually have performance targets now. However, some of the privatized industries, including gas, water, and electricity, were natural monopolies for which privatization involved little increase in competition. One of the big examples is telecommunications in the UK. So that was privatized, and British Telecom owned all of the phone lines. So if any company wanted to come in and use the phone lines or use the masts or anything like that, they had to pay a fee to British Telecom, and British Telecom would just charge less for their services, and everyone else had to charge more because they've got to pay this fee to British Telecom. So naturally, it's just a monopoly, because no one's going to pay more to not use the main provider,
Right. I always thought that was strange that monopolies aren't allowed, but I don't have the choice of where I'm getting my electricity. If I wanted to go and not use APS here, and I wanted to use Salt River Project, they don't service here, so I can't.
That is crazy. See, nowadays we don't have that anymore. There are not, like, we've changed electricity suppliers 3 times in the last 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, we've changed internet providers 3 times as well. We've changed house insurance, changed pet insurance, or like gas supply, electricity, all of that, water, all of it can be changed, basically. So
interesting.
That's cool. Yeah, it's a weird thing. It works now, but man, it did not until like the 2000s. It took a long time for privatization to finally be deregulated and monopolies to be broken up. Also, the privatized industries that demonstrated improvement sometimes did so while still under state ownership. So they were already profitable before they were privatized. So why are you privatizing them? Oh, yeah, because you need to get a shitload of money together. So that's why. Yeah, people will pay top dollar so they can make 10 times more top dollar at the back end, The cost of all these privatized industries in the UK is now through the roof for the average consumer. They're really inefficient because the privatized companies don't invest any money in the infrastructure while constantly putting up their prices. The railways come to mind. You buy a ticket, unfortunately, it is just one price, and you just get on whatever train comes through. It doesn't go straight to the company. The company just gets a cut, pretty much. It's a weird system with rails. So, yeah. And there are basically no options other than living off-grid in the UK, like the fucking Unabomber. So that's basically the only alternative you have to that lifestyle, because we pay a lot for our bills. We have options, but the problem is that they're all price fixing. So we can change suppliers, but you're changing like
just the name,
40, 50 quid a year, if that, on like a £3,000 a year electricity bill. You know, like that's fucking $5,000. That's a lot of money.
I got you.
Yeah. So Margaret Thatcher secretly tried to press ahead with a politically toxic plan which nearly dismantled her entire government, as well as the welfare state that she wanted to get rid of. And it nearly caused a cabinet riot, and her famous declaration that the NHS is safe with us. Newly released Treasury documents have shown that the plan, commissioned by Thatcher and her Chancellor Geoffrey Howe, included proposals to charge for state schooling. So schooling was no longer going to be free. You're going to have to pay yearly amounts. Introduce compulsory private health insurance. So, and a system of private medical facilities that would, of course, mean the end of the National Health Service. They wanted to privatize medicine for everyone.
Oh,
that wasn't popular at all. Nigel Lawson, who was a politician, in his memoirs said the paper of long-term public spending options had been buried after what he described as the nearest thing to a cabinet riot in the history of the Thatcher administration. They had to run her out of the room because people were throwing stuff at her. That's how unpopular. Yes.
Okay.
That's how unpopular it was. Like, even the Tories, who love privatization and who love small government and who hate spending money on public things, were like, excuse me, I like not paying to have my heart fixed. I really like that. Can we keep it that way? No? Okay, right. Well, I'm going to fucking throw this at you. You know, like.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, the healthcare is such a complex thing that you need to like have availability to, that it shouldn't be so expensive.
The greatest example I can think of is, ironically, someone who voted for Thatcher, my grandmother. So my grandmother lost her mother when she was 12 years old. I think it was 12, 14, something like that. My great-grandmother died when she was in her late 30s because private healthcare was the norm then, and the money would come in from her father's really small local job where he was delivering coal, and it would go straight back out the door again because her mother was always ill. And then eventually she died. And now we have a situation where my grandmother was born into and raised in a world where penicillin became a thing and the NHS became a thing. She's 93 years old now, and most of her female relatives were all dead by their 40s. That's the difference public health can, like, socialized healthcare can make.
That's huge.
Exactly. They've doubled her life expectancy, basically. And she is a little woman who grew up in rationing and during the war and shit like that. She's lived into her 90s now. She eats boiled onion with cheese sauce on it for her lunch.
It's the weirdest thing that I've ever heard of.
It's such a rationing thing.
Oh,
that's desperation for you. But that's the difference free healthcare can make. People live longer. They contribute more. There are more innovators in society if they don't have to worry about how they are going to pay for the latest ailment. If they just fight through, you shouldn't have to do that. And I think it's a marked point on any society. If you have to pay for medicine, that fucking society has failed for me. Anyway, in her own memoirs, Thatcher claimed to have been horrified by the paper that was leaked and insisted that she and her ministers had never seriously considered getting rid of free healthcare in the country. The CPRS paper had been partially leaked, and she was only able to quell the subsequent furore by famously pledging that the NHS is safe with us at the October 1982 Tory party conference. At this point, Margaret Thatcher is nearly as unpopular in the UK as she was in Ireland. Remember I pointed out she had an Irish great-grandmother or grandmother? Something like that?
Yeah, you had mentioned that.
Yeah, she's descended from Irish people. She weren't popular over there because of her policies in Northern Ireland and the repression of different people over there. And Thatcher herself narrowly escaped injury in an IRA assassination attempt when a bomb, a massive fucking bomb, went off at the Brighton Grand Hotel early in the morning of October the 12th, 1984. 5 people were killed, including the wife of Minister John Wakeham. Thatcher was staying at the hotel to prepare for the Conservative Party conference, which she insisted should open as scheduled the following fucking day.
What?
Someone blew her up and her room was destroyed. She's like, "No, I'm going on stage."
No.
Yes. Have you seen there's the fucking blast site at the hotel at the Grand in Brighton.
And then she's like, yeah, go on anyway.
Yeah, fuck it. She delivered her speech as planned, though rewritten from her original draft in a move that was supported across the political spectrum and enhanced her popularity with the public just in time for another fucking election. By the way, I've stayed at that hotel and they've done a really shit job of rebuilding it. It's a fucking dive. I paid £150 a night for a hotel room where the light in the bathroom didn't work. The temperature in the room was 100 million fucking degrees, and I had to sleep with the window open. And across in front of me was like the main boulevard in Brighton, where people would scream and shout and dance in the street. Fun. Yeah, Brighton's a fun town. Let me tell you, it's like it's like the San Francisco of the UK. It's the LGBT capital of the country. Okay. Great Mexican food as well. I had really, really good Mexican food there. I also saw a man in a car nearly drive into a group of tourists that weren't hurrying across the crosswalk fast enough for his liking. One of the tourists gave the car a flying kick, and he got out of the car and tried to attack the tourist. The tourist knocked him out. The guy got back up, got in his car, and chased the guy down the street in a car and got arrested. So that was my experience of Brighton. Yeah. Violence in the streets. And
wow.
Then we went and had a Mexican meal, and I had some salsa at the bar, and it was so spicy it gave me hiccups. It was really fucking I had to drink like half liter of milk to stop myself from hiccuping. It was really bad. So Thatcher helped positive maybe Thatcher helped to put climate change, acid rain, and general pollution in the British mainstream in the late 1980s, calling for a global treaty on climate change in 1989. Her speeches included one to the Royal Society in 1988, followed by another to the UN General Assembly in 1989. I can remember the Keep Britain Tidy campaigns from the early 80s because the streets were full of shit at that point, and it's nowhere near that bad anymore, thanks to this campaign. Literal shit, dog shit, human shit, crisp packets, garbage, and now it's not. It's much better, and also recycling started. But before you get too up on Margaret Thatcher being a green person who wants to save the planet, she actually came to the realization after the oil crisis and didn't want to rely on countries in the Arabian Peninsula for oil. So she wanted to move us towards nuclear energy and renewables so that we could provide our own electricity. I think you got a picture of her from the Tory party conference after she was bombed. See if she's still got the antiquing in her hair.
I think this might be from the UN speech
that's
about
the
climate
UN.
change. Yeah,
that's fucking hell. Look at the shoulders on that jacket, man. She basically invented that look, didn't she? The power, her and Melanie Griffiths with the fucking power dressing outfits.
Yeah,
that's
the 80s shoulder pad suit.
Shoulder pads, yeah. Just make yourself look more manly by putting some shoulder pads in there, ladies. Yeah, she does look like a fucking linebacker, especially with the helmet hair. The Financial Times reported in 2011 that her government had secretly supplied Iraq under Saddam Hussein with non-lethal military equipment. I don't know what that is. What is non-lethal military equipment? Is that toilet paper? What the fuck is that? Sandwiches?
Yeah, sandwiches. Wrenches.
Here you go, Saddam. Ham and cheese. Yeah, enjoy that. Classy move, Margaret. Having withdrawn formal recognition from the Pol Pot regime in 1979, the Thatcher government backed the Khmer Rouge, keeping their UN seat after they were ousted from power in Cambodia by the Cambodian-Vietnamese War. Although Thatcher denied it at the time, it was revealed in 1991 that while not directly training any Khmer Rouge, the people that massacred millions of their own people, from 1983, the Special Air Force Service, the SAS, which is the British version of the Green Berets, were sent to secretly train the armed forces of the Cambodian non-communist resistance. So that's straight out of the fucking CIA's playbook. Right. Yeah, destabilize that government right away.
Do you think trained who?
Oh, I think the SAS went over there and they were like, oh, yeah, this is a very effective killing technique right here. We really need to get this going. And then oh, God. So I haven't covered it in this episode. I completely forgot to do it. The Iranian embassy incident. So Iranian, I guess you could call them terrorists, freedom fighters, depending on who you talk to, stormed the Iranian embassy and took a bunch of hostages. And it was a 7-day standoff. And the response should have been a negotiation. It should have been peaceful attempts. Margaret Thatcher's idea was, I am going to form a group of people. They are going to look like they're negotiating, and the entire time the SAS are going to break in there and murder everyone. And that's footage that you can get on television. Yeah, so there's Margaret Thatcher with the SAS who stormed the Iranian embassy. And there is very famous news footage, which I actually used for the trailer of this episode, where, because people knew about the SAS, but they didn't really know what they were. They didn't really know what they did. They're like, oh, they're like Green Berets. They're just really good in the army. These guys were actually sent in to do the shit that nobody else would do, could do, or should really be doing. Might be a bit illegal. So they sent the SAS in, and there's very famous news footage. You've got a picture of it here, of them basically in this outfits, climbing down onto the balconies, throwing a grenade through the window, and then just casually walking away while the fucking building explodes. Starts a massive fire. Yeah. Only one hostage died, and I think it was a direct response of like the fire or something. All of the hostage takers were killed except for 2, I think. The SAS just went in there and wiped them out. And Margaret Thatcher had like a hotel room nearby where she was running the whole thing. Also, I think a police. Yeah, it was an extreme mission. They did a bunch of stuff like that. The SAS were very efficient and scary. So there was a friend of, this is a random thing, and I think I might have known someone who was in the SAS, but like, so a friend of my mother's who was working in the NHS, her husband, he said he worked in the military, but he couldn't say what he did. And there was one night where he came back. He was like, I have to go away on a mission. I'll see you in like 72 hours or whatever it was. And she was asleep at night. And he came back 3 days later when she was in bed. And he sat on the end of the bed and started crying. Ooh. And he was sunburnt. And she was like, what's wrong? And he was like, you have no idea how close this country came to war tonight. And there was sand all over the floor. So she was like, I don't know where he'd been, but it was somewhere with sand, and he got a tan, and he was talking about the potential for a world war. So that's really fucking scary. You know, when you know something like that in your life, it's pretty fucking intense. I think you've got another thing at the Iranian embassy. Yeah, so there we go. That's what happens when you chuck a grenade in a building and just let the fire rip through it.
Yeah, it does a little damage.
Does a little bit. Yeah, I'll be turned into 7 or 8 nice luxury flats in no time at all. So despite opposite personalities, Thatcher bonded very quickly with US President Ronald Reagan. She gave strong support to Reagan's administration during the Cold War policies based on their shared distrust of communism. Together, they did all they could to install neoliberal policies in the foundation of both the US and UK politics and economic structures, the effects of which are still happening now, and we're still feeling the bad stuff to this very day, neoliberalism. They were fast friends. They didn't always agree. In fact, sometimes she was very angry with him for some of his stuff in the Cold War, particularly around Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff like that. But
and he was constantly throwing jelly beans at her.
Yeah. Tear down this wall. No, that's not me. That's the different person. That's Gorbachev. I'm not Gorbachev.
Sorry, I forgot.
You look so similar to him. So Yeah, so they were fast friends, and she even dedicated one of her biographies to him. That's how close they
Oh,
were. Yeah,
wow.
to Ronald Reagan. They had a very close friendship, basically due to their love of sweet, sweet cash and hatred of damn socialism. Now, I got a really cool picture there. I'm doing very well over here. Well, Margaret, if you want to have some jelly beans thrown at your face, I can do that anytime you want. Um, we need to move on now to one of the most controversial parts of Margaret Thatcher's tenure, her record in the LGBTQ community. It's inconsistent at best. Let's put it that way. After winning the 1987 election, third in a row for Margaret Thatcher, she knew she was on to a winner. Basically, she could do no wrong in her own eyes. So she denounced local education authorities for teaching children that they have an inalienable right to be gay, and introduced something called Section 28, which outlawed the promotion of homosexuality as a pretend family relationship. So basically like Russia and parts of the southern US to this very day, basically trying to outlaw homosexual teaching to children to make sure that they know it's okay to be who they are, because some of them are gay, and you're not going to stop that by not telling them that. So you've got a picture there, I think. It's fear-mongering at its best.
Yeah. Let me pop this up here. I figured this looked a lot like their labor isn't working thing.
Yeah, that was their attempt. Labor isn't working. And also it just speaks to the lowest, like, horrible hatred of gay people. Like, get them to vote for you. Young, gay, and proud. Police out of school, the playbook for kids about sex. Like, it's the same shit that people have been pulling for hundreds of years now. It's fear mongering around minority groups, and in this case, it's LGBTQ people. So, despite the fact that no one was ever prosecuted under Section 28, the law made teachers feel that they could not tell kids that if they were gay, it was okay. It effectively scared them from talking about being gay, even when children were being physically attacked for who they were. That is fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know how any mother, father, human being can ever really live with a decision like that. Some gay men who knew Margaret Thatcher have said she actually liked gay people on an individual basis, which is always the case because they can help her some way.
To be fair, I like all people on an individual basis too, because there's a lot of assholes out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The journalist and former Conservative MP Matthew Parris says that Thatcher told him she appreciated the difficulty he had in coming out to her when he did so in a private occasion, because he was fucking terrified that she was going to do something or get him blacklisted. It's a fair concern.
Yeah.
Also, this is a really random one. The day before she resigned, she awarded Ian McKellen, Gandalf, and also someone who had campaigned against her based on attacks on the community throughout the 1980s and the treatment of AIDS patients by the media and society as a whole. She awarded him a knighthood on her and her day as when she resigned. She gave him a knighthood. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't know if she liked the fact that he campaigned against her and he was so effective, or if she just liked the fact that he was a very, very good actor. But yeah, that's a random thing to do.
Wow. Just you're such a good actor. I'll forgive all the rest. Here's a knighthood.
Yeah, you're so good. I don't even mind the gayness.
You're one of the individuals that I'm okay with.
Yeah, I like you on an individual basis. Just don't get together with any of your gay friends and talk about being gay in a public setting, because I will send you to prison. When I think you got a picture there of a protest against Margaret Thatcher in Section 28. Yeah, exactly.
It's them not on an individual basis.
Yeah, it's when they're in a group that she can't fucking stand it. You know, more than one in one place. It's like, oh no, I can't talk to you individually. Get the hell out away from me. When Norman Fowler set up a high-profile campaign to educate the public about HIV and AIDS, she didn't stop him. I mean, whoop-de-fucking-do. It's a health crisis. That's your fucking job, lady. So,
to be fair, Reagan didn't do great with that.
Yeah, he did not. That is true. He was too focused on drugs, bear. Okay. And shit like that. It was like, AIDS? No, that's not a thing. That's okay. Most symbolically, though, she was one of the few Tory MPs to vote for the decriminalization of homosexuality in 1967. So she voted for the decriminalization of homosexuality in the 60s. Sounds forward thinking, right? Well, one of the arguments that was made at the time that she agreed with stated that gay people should be free from the threat of prison so they could seek treatment for being gay. And pray that shit away. You know, go to church. You won't want to have sex with bottoms. You'll be fine.
Treatment.
Treatment. Just attach these electrodes to your head and you won't think about men anymore.
Oh, I thought it was going to be just 2 apples a day.
No, she went the full course. And of course, that would have been private. There's no way you're getting that free on the NHS. More telling is the fact that when Lady Young led the campaign against Tony Blair scrapping of Section 28. So Tony Blair, who there's a record out there, and I don't want to say anything, but somebody said years and years ago that there was a record out there of Tony Blair being arrested for like some sort of public thing with another man. I don't know if it's true or not. It's just something I heard. Don't take it as gospel. Don't sue me, Mr. Blair. I'm glad that you support Newcastle United FC. You're a man of the people. So she, this Lady Young, is the only person that's really campaigning against Tony Blair repealing Section 28 in 2000. So he wants children to be able to know that it's okay to be gay from a young age. He wants that to be taught in schools. So he wants to get rid of Section 28. Thatcher made her support known for keeping Section 28 by sitting next to Lady Young in the House of Lords for the vote. So she was saying, do not vote against this. This is my thing. I want kids to not think about being gay ever. So, yeah, fuck her for that.
Okay.
During her premiership, Margaret Thatcher had the second lowest average approval rating, 40%, of any post-war prime minister. Since Nigel Lawson's resignation as Chancellor in October 1989, polls consistently showed that she was less popular than her own fucking party, which were not popular at the time. No one liked the Tories in the late 80s. So,
unpopular amongst the unpopular kids.
Pretty much, yeah. She is the loser amongst losers. On the 14th of November, Michael Heseltine mounted a challenge for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Opinion polls had indicated that he would give the Conservatives a national lead over Labour. And although Thatcher led on the first ballot with the votes of 204 Conservative MPs, 54% of the vote, to 152 votes for Heseltine, with 16 abstentions, she was four votes short of the required 15% majority. So you have to have a big majority for there to not be a second round of voting, basically. So they keep voting until someone is the obvious leader.
Everything is so confusing over there to me.
It has to be a big majority for it to go through. You can't just win. You have to fucking wipe the floor with someone.
Okay. Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. If you want to be the leader of something, you can't be a marginal leader. You have to be like, you fucking idiots. You can go and hang out in the corner, all three of you. I've got 500 people behind me. You know, it's got to be that sort of victory.
Just picture like this, like wild, like exponential 12 Angry Men sort of thing going on.
I mean, that's basically it. Yeah, only with hundreds of people in the room instead of, you know, one person getting picked away going, oh, I'm not racist, but I'm not voting for you. You know, like that sort of thing. A second ballot was therefore necessary. Thatcher initially declared her intention to fight on and fight to win the second ballot, but consultation with her cabinet persuaded her to withdraw. They basically told her that they weren't going to back her.
Okay.
They were done with her shit. Famously, she used to shout at them a lot. a lot. And there's a very famous sketch on a TV show called Spitting Image, which used to have the most hideous dummies and mannequins you have ever seen, it hand puppets and stuff, that you have ever seen in your fucking life. Terrifying images. It was a very popular show, political satire. She goes out to a meal with Dennis Thatcher and her whole cabinet goes with her because they're so fucking useless. They have to follow her everywhere. And they're hanging around at the back of the restaurant, and they're ordering food, and the waiter says, "What would you like?" She says, "Oh, I'll have the fish." And he says to her, "And what about the vegetables, Mom?" And she says, "Oh, they'll have what I'm having." And she was talking about the cabinet. So that was a very famous sketch. And there's a picture here of Margaret Thatcher and then Labour leader Neil Kinnock, who was a shouty Welsh person. Look at those fucking terrifying puppets.
Oh yeah,
It's the stuff of nightmare fuel.
It's wild. They're all like just distorted and
yeah. Interestingly, the Spitting Image company that made this program, I think it ran for like 10 years. It was hugely successful. They did Phil Collins's music video for Land of Confusion. It's the Phil Collins, "This is the land of confusion." Whoa. Like that fucking song, that was done by Jesus, that face. It's really accurate. Like it's really terrifying. So they did the music video for a Phil Collins song. That's how big they were at the time. So anyway, Thatcher is now decided that she's been told that she has to withdraw after holding an audience with the Queen, calling other world leaders, probably crying down the phone to Reagan, and making one final common speech. On the 28th of November, she left Downing Street in tears. Jesus Christ. It looks like a fucking angry eagle. Yeah. I swear to God, that puppet.
Oh man.
Yeah. She reportedly regarded her ousting as a betrayal. Her resignation was a shock to many outside of Britain, with such foreign observers as Henry Kissinger and Mikhail Gorbachev expressing private consternation that she'd been kicked out of government. They clearly weren't paying attention. Chancellor John Major replaced Thatcher as head of the government and party leader, whose lead over Heseltine in the second ballot was sufficient for Heseltine to drop out. So the guy who ousted her didn't even win. So, yeah, really amazing. John Major oversaw an upturn in Conservative support, which, as they pointed out, with a new leader in the Conservatives, they have a lead over Labour in the polls. In the 17 months leading up to the 1992 general election, and led to the party to a fourth successive victory on the 9th of April 1992. Thatcher had lobbied for Major in the leadership contest against Heseltine, but her support for him waned in later years, especially after he had his fucking ass handed to him by Tony Blair's new Labour government in the 1997 election, when the Tories were basically destroyed for a generation. You got a picture there of Thatcher leaving with Dennis, I think. Yeah, there's Dennis. There's Margaret. She's been crying. I almost said bless her then. Go. Yeah.
Bye.
She's not even doing that. You know, you'd think she'd be flipping the bird to the journos or something, or the hacks on the side, but no, she's not even doing that.
Kind of looks like she's thinking it.
Yeah, I could bite your goddamn head off if I flew through this window. Thatcher did a bunch of stuff after she left. She set up a foundation. She did a bunch of consultation work, and she was hired by tobacco company Philip Morris, because of course she was. As a scientist, as a chemist, no, as a geopolitical consultant in July 1992 for $250,000 per year.
Oh, wow.
More than twice her annual salary as Prime Minister, and an annual contribution on top of that of $250,000 again to her foundation. On top of this, Thatcher was paid $50,000 per speech she delivered. She delivered up to 20 per year.
Jesus.
She's making $750,000 a year in 1992.
So you're saying tobacco is big money?
I'm saying that there's good money in them there cigarettes. So, yeah.
All right.
It's kind of crazy. She did some weird shit after she resigned. In 1998, Thatcher called for the release of former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet when Spain had him arrested and sought to try him for human rights violations. You know, the guy who murdered tens of thousands of his own citizens? She liked him. You know,
really?
Told good jokes. You know, do you remember when that picture came out of Ellen DeGeneres hanging out with George W. Bush? Everyone was like, what the fuck are you doing with him? She's like, he's funny. He's a good laugh. I have a lot of friends. Not all of them are psychopaths, but this guy's funny, you know?
Yeah, sure.
You like who you like. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, that's definitely the smile of someone who's like ripped some toenails out, you know.
Good
Jesus.
friends.
Yeah, good friends. Night on the town. So how many people did you kill this year? No, that's not my thing. No, I just sink boats. You're the one that murders people. She cited that the help he gave to Britain during the Falklands War. Pinochet was released in March 2000 on medical grounds by Home Secretary Jack Straw, who was given his first job in the government by Margaret Thatcher. So, favour for a mate.
Gotcha.
Also, I want to point out there's a really great line, really iconic line in the Eric Andre show when he's got Mel B on from the Spice Girls, Scary Spice.
Okay.
And he was like, did Margaret Thatcher have girl power? And and Mel B's like, oh, yeah, Margaret Thatcher had girl power. And he's like, do you think Margaret Thatcher effectively used girl power to filter funds to illegal paramilitaries in South America? And Mel B's like, This is one of the funny, because she's like, what the fuck kind of show have I come on here? This is crazy. Start off with a fluff question and talk to me about paramilitaries destabilizing governments. It's just, oh, that's it. Yeah. Oh, we got that. Holy shit. Yeah, that's the moment when Eric Andre also, like, she did not know what she was in for. I don't think anyone did in the early days of the Eric Andre show. That thing was a free for all.
Oh yeah. I didn't know what I was getting when I was watching it.
It's so brilliant and so shocking. I remember showing it to my wife and she was like, oh, this is really, what the fuck just happened there? Like, you get that break where you're like, you go from laughing to like, oh, that's dark. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Pinochet, so following several small strokes, her doctors advised her not to engage in further public speaking. In March 2002, Margaret Thatcher announced that on doctors' advice, she would cancel all planned public speaking engagements and accept no more, having earned, what was it, 50,000 times 20? What's that, £1 million a year?
That's so much money. Yeah.
It's so much, £1 million a year for 10 years just on public speaking. She wasn't going to do that anymore. She's going to retire from that, being a wealthy woman now. On the 26th of June 2003, Thatcher's husband, Sir Dennis, died aged 88, and like Dr. Manhattan, her last connection to humanity was severed. Thatcher's daughter, Carol, first revealed that her mother had dementia in 2005, saying her mum doesn't read much anymore because of her memory loss. In 2008, in her 2008 memoir, Carol wrote that her mother could hardly remember the beginning of a sentence by the time she got to the end.
Oh.
Just want to point out, 2005, she had dementia, and that's how bad her memory got.
God.
She was still allowed to be a member of the House of Lords for another 6 years after that. Yeah. That makes the Mitch McConnell thing look normal.
But what's the House of Lords again?
Right, so confusing. So the House of Commons is where everything happens. That's where people are elected to. That's where people make decisions. They form policy. They make up laws. They set everything in motion. They vote on it. It's approved, right? It's kind of like the House and the Senate, right? Okay. So once it's approved by the Commons, it's sent to the House of Lords for like proofreading, let's say. But a lot of the time, the House of Lords are basically retired politicians or landed gentry. They've actually done some really good. They've cut a bunch of like snooping charters. So the government wanted to do like an anti-terror thing where they could access anyone's information without a warrant and all of that shit. And the House of Lords were like, no, you stop sending us this. We're never going to approve it. So basically they send the laws for approval in the House of Lords. It gets debated for a little bit. Then it's approved by them. And then the Queen signs off on it, basically.
Okay.
So that's what it is. It's the final check for democracy before something passes into law. And it's a really important thing. And actually, in certain points in history, they've done some really important things. However, the vast majority of the people in the House of Lords are like 90 years old. They're like the 15th Earl of something who wants to just get out so he can illegally hunt some foxes and just get back to eating quail eggs and shit like that. Like, that's the kind of privilege we're talking about here. And she was in there, and a lot of the people are asleep in there, snoring away. and they just have no interest. So that's where she was making decisions. So this person who had dementia still had influence over policy for 6 years after she developed dementia.
Right. And I, of course, inappropriately made a memory joke about Reagan, and now we're in the dementia thing here.
Yeah, we're at the Reagan thing. I think it's less famous because it became less obvious with Thatcher because she was out of power at that point. Whereas with Reagan, he was in power and it started to seem like his mind was going.
Still, it's sad with dementia and Alzheimer's and losing the memory and stuff like that. But we can't have people making decisions about the lives of other people and in important decision-making positions if they are forgetting the sentence they started talking when they
because they might not remember why they're saying it. They might not remember the impetus behind why they feel so passionately about this. If you can't remember that, then you can't justify any decision. So ultimately, you can't have influence over a policy that might affect 70 to 100 million people, you know?
Yeah, because you might not remember it by the time you're done arguing it.
Exactly. Also, it's Thatcher, so she'd probably be like, "Oh, fucking charge for it." So, so Margaret Thatcher passed away on the 8th of April 2013 at the age of 87 after suffering a stroke. She had been staying at a suite in the Ritz Hotel in London since December 2012 after having difficulty with the stairs at her Chester Square home in Belgravia in London, a very exclusive neighborhood. The thing is, if she hadn't decimated social services a few decades earlier, she could have had adequate care in her own home. She wouldn't have had to go and pay £1,000 a night to live in the fucking Ritz, you know? It's her own fault. Her death certificate listed the primary cause of death as cerebrovascular accident. It's a very specific thing. Medicine. Who knows, eh? You know, and repeated transient ischemic attacks. So mini strokes, series of mini strokes. One comedian said that he had the death certificate and it actually read "The devil came to collect that." He got a lot of pushback for that. And I think you got an image of the state funeral there.
I do. It looks like it was a pretty big one.
Oh, yeah. Look, she's going to be popular with people in London. She made them a lot of money, you know, a lot of these people. And a lot of people she didn't make money for just liked her because she was a strong woman and she didn't like them, their gays, and then they're foreigners. And she crushed the trade unions and she made sure our kids didn't know they were gay and stuff like that, you know. So she's appealing to that crowd. She got a state funeral. And listen, she's a long-serving prime minister. She was the only prime minister I knew right up until 1990. So I was 9 years old by the time we got another leader. So, you know, it was a big thing. And reactions to the news of Thatcher's death were mixed across the UK, ranging from some tributes lauding her as Britain's greatest ever peacetime prime minister, that's bullshit, to large public celebrations of her death and expressions of hatred and personal vitriol. That happened. Street parties for someone dying.
That's rough.
That's pretty fucked up. I think you got a picture from a funeral. Is that the Queen?
That is the Queen from the funeral there.
One of her famous hats.
Yeah.
She
looks fancy sword there.
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd there next to her holding that sword.
That's what I went after immediately in that picture. I'm like, ooh, the sword.
Yes, because they can't have guns around her, so they're just going to have swords to keep her safe. Since her premiership, Thatcher has been portrayed in a number of television programs, documentaries, films, and plays, including by Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady, a biography of her life, which won Meryl Streep, I think, like a 3rd Oscar or something, 4th, something like that. And let's see, in which she's depicted as suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So that's a main feature of the film in that portrayal. She's the main character, or one of the main characters, in the 4th season of The Crown, where she's played brilliantly by Gillian Anderson. That's really great performance, actually.
God, about that show.
It's good. Like
it is a good
if you
show.
Want a good solid drama, like the whole of The Crown, you watch that all the way through, you'll be like, man, I've watched some quality television right there.
Yeah.
You know?
I can't remember what season I stopped on.
I think I stopped
Margaret
on
Thatcher
4.
was there.
Yeah, I think I may have stopped on that as well. I never watched the fifth one. I just never got round to it. It wasn't because I was bored. I just like there was a million other shit things happening at the time. Oh, there we go. There's one of the street parties with Thatcher in a grave. They did a bunch of Vox Pop interviews on the streets, and there's even old people going, "Oh, I'm glad she's dead. The bitch is dead." That's in Wales.
Oh man, dude, these parties are nuts. Like
these are some of the millions of people she put out of work. Yeah. These people, these are old people they're celebrating, young people, communities coming together because Margaret Thatcher died. So a proposal to erect a statue of Thatcher in her hometown of Grantham was made in 2018 by the Grantham Community Heritage Association. I got there in the end, which runs the Grantham Museum. And approval was given in February 2019 by South Kesteven District Council. What the fuck even is that as a council name? Cat Stevens. Cat Stevens District Council. It's not time to put up a statue. On the 15th of May, 2022, the statue was installed on St. Peter's Hill Green in Grantham, close to the actual museum itself. I can see your face. We're going to get to that. The statue is 10 foot 6 inches tall, so twice her actual height. Cast in bronze and depicts the late British Prime Minister Baroness Thatcher dressed in the full ceremonial robes of the House of Lords. It stands on a plinth and was created by sculptor Douglas Jennings at a cost of £300,000, about $500,000. So public money right there. So let's get to the stuff that you've got pictures of. The statue was attacked with eggs within 2 hours of its installation. Jeremy Webster, deputy director of the Attenborough Arts Centre at the University of Leicester, was alleged to have thrown the eggs, and he admitted to it and got into trouble for it. On the 28th of May 2022, days before the statue would be formally unveiled, the statue was splattered with red paint, as you can see there, and a hammer and sickle was painted on the surrounding fence.
Oh my!
There's the dude throwing the eggs. In October 2022, the statue was vandalized for a third time when it was daubed with the words "Tories out," despite it being under constant 24-hour CCTV surveillance. Pictures were subsequently circulated online showing a dildo on top of the statue's head. Those proved to be fake. Aww. We wanted it to be real. In May 2023, an 18-year-old woman was charged with criminal damage and fined after defacing the statue with the phrase "burn in hell." That's not defacement. That's just the sign that she's going to see when she eventually arrives in hell. Because she's a scientist, people. She's a scientist. That's why she's in hell. Because scientists, she didn't believe in Jesus, so she's gone to hell for that. Not the evil shit. In March 2024, Lincolnshire police reported that a statue had been defaced with a slur written in red paint. It starts with a C and ends with a T. That's the defacement. And it was. And can you believe it hasn't been vandalized in 9 months? It's quite the record. Yeah, it's been up for 2 years and it's been vandalized 4 times.
Wow.
Holy shit. So that's Margaret Thatcher. Now, I want to end on the good stuff. She did modernize elements of the British economy that did need to be modernized. We did need to move some industries towards a modern economy, towards becoming a financial powerhouse, because the economy was struggling and she needed to do that. She centralized stuff in London. There were already a bunch of financial institutions there. It made a lot of sense. However, the way she went about it was to decimate all the other industries so that people didn't have any other choice. So instead of having people transition slowly into a different economy, having them retrain in different skills, you have cut their legs off from under them. She did not support minority groups. She used popularist action and opportunities to cement her power. She destroyed various industries, the NHS, the public sector stuff was just privatized to shit. She started the Falklands War. Well, she didn't start it, but she got involved in the Falklands really to win the election, not necessarily for like the actual Falklands themselves, because she'd neglected them for years before that. She hadn't put any money into them or any industry to save them or keep them afloat or anything like that. If there'd been an actual military presence there, the invasion would never have happened. So that's because she was cutting back. And her statue was so unpopular. And I want to point out again, in her own hometown, it was vandalized 4 fucking times in 2 years. That's how monumentally unpopular this woman was.
That's terrible.
It's a lot, isn't it? And I just want to, she is a human being. We have to remember that. I'm Welsh, and I do not like Margaret Thatcher. Her legacy to me is trying as much as she can to destroy the major industries of my country and not helping rebuild anything in their place. That's her legacy to my country. And to the rest of the country, she abandoned Liverpool. She ripped out the heart and soul of various communities and didn't replace it, all so that she could make her cronies in London happy. It's difficult for me to see a positive side to her, other than the fact that she was the first female prime minister, and that's an important thing. But of all the people we could have had, I wish it had been someone with empathy, really.
This picture right here, I think it kind of captures the personality.
It does.
She's just got a plan, and it ain't good for you.
Yeah, there's something every picture of her, and it's a skill, I'll give her that. There's something vaguely menacing about every fucking picture of that woman. It's terrifying. I remember Ben Elton, who is a comedian and author and who created Blackadder, the comedy series, which is brilliant if anyone gets a chance to see it. It's a historical comedy from various points in British history. He said when Margaret Thatcher was having surgery on her hand to deal with arthritis, he was like, they shouldn't interrupt the natural flow of things because it's not arthritis. Her hand is becoming a claw.
Ouch.
That's fucking funny. So I know this is a lot of it is very new to American listeners, particularly younger people who will not have lived through the Thatcher regime. My family was decimated by Thatcher's policies. The communities around me that I moved to were decimated by Thatcher's policies. It took them 30 years to recover. Some of them still haven't recovered and may never recover because there's just nothing there and people have just gone from the communities and they're dead. There's just empty houses and derelict buildings everywhere and shit. So, Margaret Thatcher, thoughts? It's a lot,
Man.
I know.
I knew that she wasn't great for things, but I knew she also had a legacy where a lot of people didn't dislike her.
Yeah. She was powerful. I think that's why some people liked her. She had authority.
Right.
You know?
That sort of long-lasting fuckery that continues on like that, I feel like, gosh, I want to go with a high score, obviously, because it's a big one. It was a long one. It was drastic impacts that, even though it wasn't like trying to wipe out an entire race of people on purpose.
No.
I still think she deserves a 98 for fucking things up real bad.
That is fair. I completely get that. And actually, you know, sometimes we go with the, well, they didn't kill anyone. Not directly, but certainly the Falklands. Yeah, she kind of indirectly, deliberately killed 250 people there. And the impact she's had on
shoot them in
families.
the back, basically.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
That's really fucked up. And all of the shit where people have lived through abject poverty and really the NHS was torn to pieces by her to the point where it should be a shining example of great free healthcare when actually it's really struggling and has been because consistent Tory governments after her have followed on her policies of asset stripping the fucking thing. And the policies that her and Reagan installed, neoliberalistic politics and economics, have had such a terrible negative effect on generations of people. I know baby boomers are doing great, but anyone below them, the fucking ladder has disappeared.
Oh yeah, I pulled
And
that thing right up.
yeah, they
Kicked it
really
right
did.
away.
And a lot of that is thanks to Thatcher and Reagan and a few other people as well. And now we're living in a world that's like fucking romanticizing that politics, and it is not good. That is her legacy. You now have a generation of people in this country that can't buy their own houses, that can't afford electricity. Homelessness is rising. Social mobility is at its lowest since the 1930s. Meanwhile, money and wealth is being stored by old people and billionaires who have been emboldened by her policies that she created. And we now have a housing crisis, a public sector crisis. We have a jobs crisis. We have a fucking food crisis because farming wasn't invested in. There's basically crises up and down the country. And a lot of them can trace their roots directly back to her policies. I hate to say it, but it's the case.
Fair.
Yeah. So episode 100 is in the bag. Just like Margaret Thatcher's clothes sold at a charity shop. I'm sure they got a bit of money for them. Sure. Yeah, just donate all that Prada. You know, I'm sure that the shoulder pads will come back into fashion eventually. So that's our episode. Thank you so much to everyone who stuck around with us for 100 episodes. This show has changed my life. Communicating with you all, being able to communicate. I just love communicating and talking about fun things and maybe helping people wherever we can. That's our main thing. I think for me, Derek, the biggest positive is my friendship with you. I genuinely do love you, my man, and you have become a very big pillar in my life. So thank you so much for 100 amazing episodes.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be your friend and spend this time here, and love you back, man.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. If you want to support us financially and keep us going to episode 200, at which point we'll be on good old Cheers money, I hope, Cheers cast money. You can go to patreon.com/history's greatest idiots to get behind the scenes access to scripts, our lives in footage and pictures, exclusive recordings, exclusive gifts when you join, and if you stay with us for a year or 2 years, special gifts on the way. And also you can find us on Instagram at History's Greatest Idiots, and I think that's probably similar on Blue Sky. I can't remember.
I don't know. I didn't know we had
YouTube. I know, I just added it and put a bunch of stuff on there, and no one follows us, so I was right. And you can also find all of our videos on YouTube if you go at History's Greatest Idiots. And if you go on Spotify, you can now watch our videos live, and we get a little bit of ad revenue from that. So please do, I want my money. So thank you once again to our wonderful patrons who stuck by us: Jesse Christ, Kimberly Johnson, Andrew Zavara, Dilly Bob, Silent Crisis, and Carrion. Thank you so much for sticking by us. Thank you to everyone who's listened. And that is the end of season 4. Our next episode, episode 101, will be taking place in a room with torture devices and rats. Now, I'm going room 101 in my head. I need to stop. I need to get out of 1984. The dystopian world future. So until season 5, Derek, would you like to say goodbye?
Goodbye, everyone.
And we will see you all again for season 5 and more idiocy very soon. Take care now. Bye.